Hello, my name's Melinda McIntosh, and I am a local artist. I live on the outskirts of Monticello. My educational background started off at Parkland College here in Champaign. I have several degrees from the University of Illinois and one from Eastern Illinois University. And I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades. I am a painter, I am a printmaker, I like to draw. There's a lot of different mediums that I'm involved with. This particular show is pretty much focused on my plein air painting, where I go out on location to do different paintings of the landscape, and a few studio still lifes thrown into the bunch as well. I got into plein air painting about 5 or 6 years ago when I met another artist that drugged me out into the landscape to do some painting. I immediately fell in love with it, especially when we went down to Southern Illinois to Garden of the Gods. At that point, I wasn't quite sure how much I wanted to get into this, so I just simply took out a drawing board, charcoal, graphite, and went out and draw. And what really got me is when we climbed up the side of Old Stone Face. So you're looking at the trail, your feet, to make sure you're not tripping over things. We're not talking about these nice manicured trails. And lugging a tripod and gear up the side of this, I guess it's not really a mountain, but a really big hill, and sliding down the rocks in order to get back down. And that's what really got me into the whole plein air thing, or at least really sold the whole package. The challenge of finding a nice location, exploring the landscape, looking for some place that would be a really nice composition, and capturing elements of light. And that's what really got me hooked into the plein air painting. Now, plein air painting isn't exactly for everyone. I mean, you gotta like being outdoors. You have to be aware of your environment as well. Are you standing on private property, or are you in a city park? Are you doing an urban landscape? And so are you in the sidewalk and obstructing pedestrians? This is all stuff that you need to think about, as well as the aesthetics. And also, when you're plein air painting, what a lot of people don't realize is that you have a really limited amount of time in which to paint. Because, the sun is moving, your shadows are going to change. And so typically when you go out plein air painting, you only paint for about 3 hours or maybe even less. There's times I've gotten an hour into a painting or only 2 hours into a painting, and I had to stop because the light had changed so much. And if you don't stop, what happens is you start chasing the light. You've got shadows that are short on the right side of the painting, but they're too long over on the left side of the painting. And so you really have a limited amount of time. Now, that's why a lot of plein air paintings are rather small, is so that you could do that painting in that set amount of time. There are a lot of professional painters out there that do much larger pieces, and they sometimes will go out for several days in a row or with the same weather conditions. And they may have 3 mornings into one painting. They keep going back, again, under the same lighting condition. So you've got the same light and the same shadows and everything. Another really good way of getting into plein air painting is, even in Illinois and neighboring states like Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri, actually all over the nation, there are what they call plein air competitions. So like these 2 paintings that I did are at 2 different competitions. This was a nocturne painting at Augusta, Missouri, a lot of wine country there, and it was done at night, and it was specifically set up for a certain night within a certain amount of parameters. So you saw other plein air painters also out that evening, which is really kind of nice when you're out in the middle of the night painting, to have other people around you. This painting here was done at Mineral Point. Again, it was part of a competition in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. And the really nice thing about going to the plein air events are meeting up with the other artists. A lot of these communities are really into this event. Sometimes they host you, they keep you well fed, they have not only the competition, and they have cash prizes, but they also have, like pop-up galleries. And so it's also a venue for you to show your work and to sell your work as well. And the community really gets into it. Like I said, depending upon their resources, sometimes they keep you very well fed. Sometimes they host you by finding places for you to stay with families and such. And the community is all into it. And so you see a lot of other people also there painting. You have a lot of the community members stopping by and talking to you. And it's really a great way to meet other artists. And you learn so much, not only just from continuously painting and perfecting your craft, but when you talk to other plein air artists, you've got that camaraderie. You've got the stories that you get to share with each other. And you can go up and say, how did you get that color? How did you get that stone foundation? And they're very open and very nice. It's like, oh yeah, here's my colors. This is the palette that I use for this particular scene and such. So the events, unfortunately I didn't really go to any events this past year. But they're a great learning experience, a great way of networking, looking at what other people are doing. And you see a whole range of expertise from the people that have a tendency of winning wherever they go and all the events they go to people that are just starting out. And you see this whole range of artistic styles as well as experience and such. And it's really a fun thing to do if you can get to go to one. A couple of nice ones up in northern Illinois, southern Illinois, and like I said, there's several neighboring states that I've gone to their events and such. So this is another octurne, and this was from a paint out event in Fairfield, Illinois. And so what we've got here, again, this is something that I had to spend 2 evenings on because I had a limited amount of time. So we've got the exterior, we've got like the patio here of a coffee shop, we've got the round window, and so you're actually seeing into the coffee shop here. And when I said I had a set amount of time is I only had a couple of hours because this was after hours when everything was when it was dark enough for one thing to paint. And I also could only paint the interior of that for a certain amount of hours before they actually turned out all the lights and I couldn't see a thing. So it was kind of a fun thing. I really like the geometric shapes. I mean, the outside furniture, how bulky and geometric it is versus the round window, seeing the outside, the light that is spilling out and creating the really interesting shadows down here at the bottom, and then having this little bit of this interior scene. And this is a table here and a door or a big piece of wood that they had kind of as like an interior decoration. So it was really a fun challenge to do, and it took a couple of evenings in which to achieve this, and it was part of a competition. We can't plein air paint every day. You've got rainy days, you've got the winter, particularly this last February. We had beautiful snow to paint. However, when it's sub-zero, it's not really a nice time to go out and paint. I do also like to paint still lifes occasionally and just ask my husband. I love to hit estate sales, garage sales, occasionally consignment stores, not to mention all the junk I have inherited from my family. Many times I go to the sales looking specifically for something interesting to paint. So my oil cans here of all, like I said, estate sales, a couple of garage sales, and my husband just kind of rolls his eyes when I buy another oil can. So these were done inside. They were really a lot of fun. I really liked this copper, really warm metal versus the blue background. Here I was really kind of playing with the silver and gold. And basically that background is just chunks of construction paper, bright colored construction paper that I set up behind the cans and underneath them. And I was, going for something that was really very contemporary. And my personal favorite is the pink background. I really liked that rich gold, the blue, playing with some of the reflections of the pink. And again, that background was pink construction paper that I had bought for a group of Girl Scouts that were coming in for like a bookmaking workshop to earn a badge. And I really love that pink. I mean, talk about a really bold maybe bordering on the obnoxious side of pink versus something that you think of as very masculine with, the oil can. So it was something that was really a lot of fun to do. I have a lot more oil cans at home, and I do have plans to do more things with them, maybe putting them into interesting backgrounds as well. So I'm not quite done with the oil cans. That's something you'll see popping up in my work again later on. Years ago, I hate to say how many years ago when I was a student, I remember one of my instructors saying, "Do not paint barns." There's a big watercolor movement at the time. Everybody seemed to be painting barns. So when I got into plein air painting a couple of years ago, I really had to change my way of thinking, especially when you are in the Midwest and you're painting your own environment around you, especially, the rural environment. You can't help but get barns involved. And I kind of look at barns a little bit differently. They are part of our landscape, and they are also a part of our disappearing landscape. So I've got, quite a few barns in this, and you see they're in various states of disrepair. I know the personal history of some of these barns. For instance, this is one of the barns from off of one of my family farms. Truth is, it's probably not going to be there in a year. It's probably going to be burned down or torn down or something. They haven't quite decided what's to be done with it. But it really has just a limited amount of time. And so a lot of these landmarks are actually disappearing. You drive through the landscape, you see them in disrepair. And barns are something that not everybody uses anymore. With advances in agriculture, machinery has gotten so much bigger, so the barns really aren't used. Not many people have both corn, soybeans, and livestock anymore. They just stick to growing the grains and such. So they are part of the landscape that is disappearing and that you're not going to see anymore. The grain bins here back behind me, this is just simply a painting that I did from my backyard. Actually, you're seeing the same set of bins in both paintings here, kind of on different days. This is more the beginning of fall versus summer. They're a lot of fun to paint. And of course, with this last year, being a little bit stuck more at home, in this whole exhibition, there's about 10 paintings that were done from my yard. And so you don't really have to go to exotic locations or to state parks in order to get a good painting. Really, it's interesting to look at the environment that is around you. You get some really nice urban landscapes if you just look down your street, look at your neighbor's garden, your own yard, and really important to look at what is around you. One of the things they say in plein air painting is your painting is telling a story. What kind of a story? What do you want this to say? This painting really does have quite a story. Where I live, my mother lived there 19 years before I did. I've been there for 8 years. I've looked at this barn for over 20 years, and I've watched it change. I watched the roof give in. I watched all of the siding to be stripped down or to disappear into other buildings. And I had a friend who said, this is also land that is now owned by the Department of Natural Resources, so they were not using the barn. And I had a friend who kind of put a little bug in my ear saying, that barn's not going to be around for very long, because I always thought I wanted to paint it. So I finally got out in my yard, painted it, because this is the view from my backyard. And 7 days later, after this painting, it was gone. It burned down to the ground. So this is part of that, that legacy, the landmarks out there with the urban landscape that are disappearing. And I watched this barn for years, and it's no longer there. So when I paint some of these barns, I'm really kind of thinking about, the fact that we take for granted that our landmarks are going to be there forever. Our favorite trees that we like to look at, our favorite houses. We have acts of nature. Out by Allerton Park, we lose so many of the trees out there on Allerton Road because of the windstorms and thunderstorms that we have had, or something like burning down. But we really kind of take for granted our landmarks and the things that we're used to seeing. And if you're not quick and capture something, it may be gone a week later. There aren't a whole lot of power lines in some of the paintings. Like in some of the small grain bins, you will see like a power pole and the transformers. Edward Hopper, made that decision to eliminate power lines and power poles. They do appear in some of my paintings, and really it depends upon what I'm painting. I have both, included the power lines because I thought that they were an important part of that painting. They give you some really nice linear qualities to break up space, but sometimes they can be rather overwhelming. And so there are times when I intentionally do take them out because they're not really adding anything to the composition. In fact, sometimes they make it rather cluttered, but there are times when I add in those power lines, especially with a landscape where there are no buildings. It's kind of nice to have some kind of man-made construct, even if it's very minimal and not like the main part of that landscape. I think when I'm out on location, I am focused entirely on what I am doing right there and then. My phone isn't nearby, there isn't a computer, there's no social media to be looking at, and it's just a really great way to escape the world, especially when we've got bad news on the, TV and all that. Because when I'm there, it's like I have that set amount of time in which to capture the light. You're there on location, especially if you've driven a couple of hours for location, you're not going to waste your time. You're going to focus on what you're doing and such. And I think it's because I get really totally immersed in what I am doing then and there. I'm not worrying about, I need to go in and pay my bills, or I need to change laundry around. The computer is in the studio, it's not there. I'm not checking it all the time. And so I really get immersed in that particular landscape and the challenges of that particular painting. If I can go anywhere to paint, I know people who just want to stay to their home territory. I know painters that want to go travel and go all over the place. I do want to travel. I have friends in New Mexico. I went there and stayed with them and did some painting. I'd love to go back to New Mexico because it's an entirely different palette. Gustav Baumann, who was an Indiana painter and printmaker who moved to the Southwest, made the comment about throwing out his palette once he crossed over the Mississippi River. So I would love to go west because the colors are different. I'd love to get into some national parks where there's some mountains, something other than flat land. Not that flat land is bad. I mean, it's really good here for farmers, nice rich soil. Flat land is great because you've got, great views of clouds and sunsets and everything. So I'm not discouraging flat land, it's good. But once in a while, it would really be fun to go do something entirely different. We don't have mountains here. We don't have the desert and cactus. And I also have this dream about maybe renting a cottage or something on the seaside for like a couple of weeks. So yeah, I would love to travel, but I can't really give you quite one location that I must go to. I have, unfortunately, several of them. As far as artists that I have looked at, more recently I've been looking at the tonalist movement. So instead of being object driven, they're thinking more along moods. That's one of the next steps that I'm wanting to go as far as my own plein air painting is different times of day, like really early morning, out where I live, late afternoon, or in the summer about 7:30 is like the magic hour. The sun is setting and you've got that sunset that is reflecting on the trees. So, you know, I've seen several people, you know, it's like the Russian tonalists are really pretty interesting. Of course, you look at the European Impressionists. As far as some of the contemporary landscape painters I see, Jim McVickers is really good, Kathleen Dunphy. There's an artist in San Diego that paints a lot of urban scenes, Danny Grigio. I mean, he does fantastic paintings of like interstate or freeway underpasses, alleyways, RVs. I mean, you know, not everything has to be this beautiful, nice garden. You see some really astounding paintings of McDonald's. I saw a beautiful painting of McDonald's, you know, really obnoxiously painted McDonald's with the yellow stripes, the drive-through lane, the parking lot had just rained, so the reflections. And I never ever thought that I could see a painting of a McDonald's that I would consider beautiful or outstanding. So I'd say Danny Grigio, even though that's not subject matter that I paint, I love his work. And this is just something I've seen through, you know, Plein Air painter groups on Facebook. Go to the museums, you know, Cranard Art Museum has got some fantastic landscapes as a part of their permanent collection. Indianapolis Museum of Art has got wonderful landscape paintings. Go up to the Chicago Art Institute. You know, go look at real work when everything opens up again. You'll learn more from looking at other people. Go to plein air events, even if you don't want to actually participate in part of the competition, at least look at the paintings that people are doing. And a lot of these are local artists, or at least kind of neighboring states. It's a great way to learn about plein air painting, to see it. If you go to, we have local galleries. We have some rather nice local galleries in our community as well. They'll allow you to get fairly close to a painting, to look at it without setting off the alarms like at the Chicago Art Institute. I have pretty strong drawing skills. I have a friend who's also a plein air painter up near Bloomington, and Dale always comments about, when he looks at my painting, he says, yeah, I could tell you're a printmaker. And I think he's always commenting on I have a more linear style, and also the fact that I have the really strong drawing skills. And I think if you're interested in painting, whether it's studio painting or painting out in the landscape, drawing skills are really very important.